So you can use this.
Yes, thank you. So nice to be here again after I don't know how many years, probably about 10 years or so, maybe more.
Oh, is it that long?
I think so, remember. I think
Yeah,
so.
we were in touch online though.
Online. Definitely in touch. You have to excuse me for two things. One is if I fall asleep, it's not because the speech is boring. It's because of the conditions around traveling yesterday from Dubai to here. And on SpiceJet, which is another experience of several delays, etc. Do you need to be admitting people?
No, we will do that.
Okay. And the other thing is that my grandsons love me so much, a 6-year-old and 3-year-old, that they decided to give me their cold. So, so on that basis, I have a bit of a cough. So I'll try not to irritate you too much with that, but that's about it. So I was just sharing with Premnath and Mugdha earlier that I got into entrepreneurship education in 1986, long before many of you were born, I think. Don't nod, it's rude. Don't nod. Shows how old I am. That was because I had been in industry, then did my MBA, and at the end of my MBA, which was at Cranfield University, I thought, why did I do the MBA? It only seemed to be about earning more salary. Because all my batchmates were, running towards Bank of America, Citibank, blah, 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 all this stuff, all looking for bigger salaries, uplift, fancy cars, and so on. And they somehow did not, I thought, is that it? I spent a year of my life doing a full-time MBA at this pace. I could have increased my salary some other way. Why do I have to do it like this? I couldn't understand it. And so I spoke to my professor who I'd met, who I'd quarreled with and argued with, Malcolm Harper. And I said, I don't understand this at all. It just doesn't do it for me. So then we got into a conversation, which led me to doing a PhD about the social relevance of management education. So that was kind of the essence behind it. And after some 3.5 years of my PhD doing that, I wrote a concluding section in my dissertation, which more or less said that if business schools are to take their role, the importance of their role more seriously, then they have to do more about entrepreneurship. Because helping wealthy people to get even more wealthy is a very noble task. But to help others who are not in that position to do something, change their lives, is kind of maybe more important, more relevant. For me, actually, frankly speaking, I don't know if I needed my PhD for that because that's coming from my family anyway, my parents and grandparents, that kind of mentality. But nonetheless, that was what started it off. So in a sense, I wrote my own job description for going into entrepreneurship education at that point. Little by little, as I learned my way into it, I realized that what I was doing, probably more than anything else, was doing education for entrepreneurship and not about entrepreneurship. So business schools are doing it about entrepreneurship. They'll tell you how other people did it, using case studies and this and that, which is all very valuable. But then it's up to you then to interpret how Nike put their brand on their shoes is relevant to my med tech company, right, or my biopharma business. Or how a $20 billion company launched a new product in the marketplace and spent $150 million doing it. How does it affect me? And I've got basically some 50 lakh rupees in my bank account, right? So how do these things matter? So unless you do education for, it doesn't make. So that then led me to a career, I guess, of trying to teach and work with people on what they should be doing, their vision, their purpose, their strategy, the actions, the operations, and so forth. All along the way, you find also that people are not entirely listening to everything. They go off and do their own thing. And there's something about learning from mistakes. People will argue, fast fail and so on, learn from mistakes. And then about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, last year, what am I talking about? Last year, I gave a retrospective talk on what I had learned in enterprise education. to a conference to do with entrepreneurship education. And then I thought, I've been reflecting on all the mentoring I'm doing now. I thought, you know what, it's time to reflect on what failures I have seen as well along the way. So you will get those failures listed in Fortune magazine and this magazine, that magazine, the top 10 reasons, the 7 reasons, the 12 reasons, the 10 reasons, the 5 reasons, and so on. They're usually the same broad headings. I ran out of cash, didn't have product market fit, the team was poor. It's like saying the reason there is flooding on our main roads is because it's raining. It doesn't say that there's no drainage, proper drainage. This could be a reason for flooding. Or there is this climate change is happening, the rainfall is so intense, we don't know how to control it. So no, nothing deeper than those in those articles. You might accuse me of the same thing by the time I finish my presentation, because I'm trying to cover a lot of ground. But basically, we're saying, okay, what are the reasons behind these headlines that I've seen that have caused failures and have been terminal for some businesses? And that's the agenda. So it's a slightly long context setting, but I hope you appreciate it's coming from the idea of, yet again, as an educator speaking about it, but from practice. So, doesn't seem to want to move forward. Want to speak?
Just click on the slides.
Okay, so just a down arrow. Try this again.
Yeah, now it will work.
Yeah, perfect. So, one of the arguments given is it's all about the people, right? It's the team, not good enough quality, etc. What do we mean by that? It's all about the people. This is what I've seen and faced, and I have lost money as well on this, you know. And if I didn't have a tolerant wife, I'd have a lot of trouble with this, some of this stuff. The top of my list, I would say, is the reckless leadership. A reckless CEO, in particular, who's making commitments, doesn't really fully understand what's going on, but spending money left, right, and center because of this notion of what investors ask you for, stretch targets. Have a stretch target. What does that even mean? That just means make a stick to beat yourself with. Right? And unless you have a stretch target for VCs, investors, and so on, well, they're not running your company, but they want you to make profits for them, which of course is a very noble cause. They want to have a stretch target. But that then leads the CEOs to behave in reckless manners, I think. And certainly, in our case, the story with that chap was, he came to this particular idea, thought this was a really good idea, etc. He had grown a very big business within a bank, hundreds of millions of dollars from nothing, in terms of run rate revenues and so on and so forth. He offered to invest in the company. That's already a good sign. He believes in it. And the third indicator was he arrived in a Porsche. What can go wrong with that? I mean, God, CEOs arriving in a Porsche, his own Porsche, don't even buy him one. So he was spending money left, right, and center and making commitments all over the place. Absolute nightmare fellow. Realized quickly, but couldn't get rid of him fast enough. One of the suppliers eventually made a claim through the account for unpaid bills, and that was it, the company had to be shut down. That took $500,000 of investor money and various other projects that went in. We were very early days. We were in a software company to do with, ironically, team building. There's another irony there. And the only way we could describe the company was saying, and it's a self-referential database, and the more data you put in, the more accurate it gets. I think nowadays it's called AI, right? So we were trying to build an AI platform some 20 years ago without fully understanding what we were building. The computer science postdocs from Edinburgh University had no idea what we were trying to do. This guy was spending money like anything on that and other stuff. The other area which I see in many young companies is poor definition of roles and responsibilities and even of expectations. And that is very expensive hidden cost. Hire somebody and don't have a clear role because we don't ourselves know, we're still inventing our business. So unless a person comes in, is able to invent or co-invent with you as you build a team, Because it's really difficult for them to understand what they should be doing for you. As soon as you're in that situation, expectations get mismatched. And for each person that's hired, let's say 30% of their salary is wasted if they're fired very quickly. So if we're going through 8 or 10 people, we're going through an enormous amount of hidden cost in recruitment and mismatched expectations, and a lot of broken hearts along the way, and reputational risk. All sorts of things happen because of that. One of the companies I'm involved in, last year, 2022, everyone's coming out of COVID, right? So they were investing heavily, trying to grow the team. And I think one of the mistakes being made was they were hiring in panic rather than hiring to a plan. And the outcome of that was a big mistake recruits. And those big mistake recruits meant that all those youngsters are gone now, and we're starting again. Right? So what's the next round of mistakes that are going to be made? Luckily, it's not terminal in that case, but it could be a very challenging situation. So I've seen both. Top team values are not shared and respected is another one. We don't believe in each other's values. I'm facing this with my co-founder in TerraWaste. You know, he's a design guy, a sustainability guy, and I'm not. I'm not a design guy. I'm a business strategy sort of entrepreneurship guy. So we're coming from very different perspectives on something. We're trying to raise a pitch deck to raise 3 million in investment, dollars, pounds, whatever, euros. And there are like half a dozen slides of sustainability in there. Look, whole business is about sustainability. So we don't have to keep on repeating the message. Let's take that out, because what our investors want to see is what we will do with their money, not keep banging the drum for sustainability. We got that message, right? Oh, no, but we have to inspire. So enormous amount of time is wasted and lost. This is the planet is less sustainable with every argument that you have. Let's calm down a bit. Right? Governance in the boardroom is something I feel quite passionate about. And this early stage companies don't necessarily have a clear idea about what that means. The best example I can give you. Thank you. I'm currently in the middle of recovering my own tax losses on a company I invested in, because the two youngsters, one happened to be Indian, happened to be a British guy, English guy, and they raised money. But they said they wanted to keep the team small and agile. I think that you need a chairman in their case, who can pour oil on troubled waters, who can see something that's gone wrong, bring some wisdom to the table. Oh no, our VC thinks we should keep the board small. Who's running the company? You or the VC? No, we're running it, but their advice is keep it small, keep it tight. Just the two co-founders, plus eventually the two VCs. So who's actually running the company then, right? So they did not get any independent non-exec. They did not get any independent chairman to really understand deeply how to build a business. So they started off a company which had a very clear vision statement, which is data to help decision-making for farmers. That was the print. Between 3 to 4 years from that, suddenly when I went to one of the shareholder meetings, it was something along the lines of, we're going to work with the supply chain, agri-food to bring integration, this, that, and that. What does that even mean? Now, who's the customer for that? In the first statement, you know the customer is the farmer, right? End of subject. Just figure out how to reach the farmer, what's the value proposition, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I said supply chain. There's like 1,000 people in it. So whose requirements are you going to meet? Oh, that was the VCs coming in with their fancy ideas because they'd invested something in the supply chain company somewhere else. But because of lack of governance in the board of who plays the power structures, eventually, actually, these two young entrepreneurs were really only like a tail wagging the dog. They were having their tail wagged by the dog. The VCs were telling them what to do. And that company's gone. That really has. And governance in the boardroom, I think, is one that brings a level of balance and understanding. Another company right now where somebody who shouldn't be a director is a director. He's conflicted. He won't see it. And I know that I'm going to have to take a tough line on that when I get back from my trip to India on this. Very sweet guy, but totally in the wrong slot. He's got 2 directorships, both full-time. How can he do that? He's refusing to see it because he's a salesman at heart. Yeah, I can do it. No, you can't. Track it. Just can't do it. Just step away from it. Doesn't matter. Pride is getting in the way. So for those of you that have had, you all here because you've seen some of these issues, right? So that's what's bringing you. So these are some of the deep issues that happen. Immature board, lacking massive experience or expertise is also a massive issue. Don't know what I'm talking about. If I'm involved in a waste remediation company, plastics, I'm not a chemical engineer, trying to learn my way there, but the other team members are also. So we have one oil and gas person there. We are extremely vulnerable in the next phase of our business for not having deep experience and expertise on waste handling in the industry, at a global level, even a local level. So the only way I'm doing that now is I know that, so hopefully I won't make that mistake, and I'm bringing in expertise into the team. So domain experience, subject matter expertise, all required. Jamnath, I hope you don't mind me saying it's one of the business plan competition events, BIRAC events I saw many years ago. The jury panel was made up of about 8 or 10 people, and some of you would have experienced that. All retired professors, entirely noteworthy and eminent in their own field, absolutely clueless about entrepreneurship and startup, right? I think some of the big names in India. I mean, you've all graced them and touched their feet and whatever it is you do, but they don't know their topic of entrepreneurship. They know their science deeply. And in the jury panels, they're grilling these young entrepreneurs about the science, not about the business. So they come in all shapes and sizes, not just here. I see it happening elsewhere also. You know, what's your return on investment? I don't know. I don't know who my customers are yet. I don't even if my technology will work. What are you talking to me about? Let's just get to that proof of concept principle first. And I think those are the issues going on. Well, social skills becomes interesting. This is where just being able to talk to your colleagues in a decent human way. The principle of kindness is often forgotten under stress conditions. You know, and sometimes when we get a bit irritated, we end up, and I'm guilty of this, maybe humiliating the person who's at the receiving end of my short temper. Right? And so if you praise in public, but you reprimand in private, I think life is okay in organizations. But the moment the reprimand becomes public, you have all sorts of problems going on. And I have seen companies where there was one incident I particularly remember well, turning up in my car to a meeting. It was supposed to be a senior team meeting, and I was due to facilitate the discussion because there were some tensions in the meeting. And as I came into the car park, 2 of the directors were actually having a fist fight. Actually having a fist fight in the car park. I saw that through my car window and I thought, you know what, I'm vegetarian. And these guys have got way bigger problems than I'm going to solve for them. I just reversed the car and left. I didn't even call them. They never called me. Life is good. As I say in the Middle East, kullu khalas habibi, kullu khalas. It's all over. And the trust breaks down on the team. And why would the trust break down? Because people don't do what they say they're going to do. You know, and they're a bit evasive on tasks and events and activities. And these are things that actually are very, very corrosive. And my goodness, I have seen so many such instances. There's no need for that trust to have broken down, lack of communication, lack of doing stuff that needs to be done, all of these things. So when they say it's all about people and dysfunctional teams and so on, this is just a small menu of the kinds of things that go really badly wrong. This is the next level of detail down. Then behind each of these sentences, I have at least a half an hour story I can give you on it, right? Some other time. One of the things that's winding me up right now about one of the companies I'm helping is that the founding team is not going deep enough into the topic, not really understanding it. You've seen colleagues, maybe you yourself are like that. But the moment somebody says something to you, you are immediately on your keyboard asking Professor Google. right? And before the conversation is over, you have found out the 5 most important things you need to know about a given topic. There are others who will tell you stuff, they have no idea what it even means. You just haven't drilled. And where that is really critical is in the finances and accounting area. You're taking other people's money, one needs to drill deep to understand the principles of it, not just report on it. And that is certainly one of the companies I'm seeing is just not drilling deep enough on the topics that actually matter to that company. And 2 of them, we had a strategy discussion with the founders. It was a Zoom session, I think. And I asked, where are you getting your insights from for your strategy development? Because as they were describing their strategy to one of my colleagues on the team, it all sounded incredibly operational and not at all strategic. It was all about, yeah, we're doing this, we're doing TikTok, we're doing blah, 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 all this stuff. That's a lot of noise. But where are you aiming your work at? That's the strategy. You could see on the blank look on the face, they didn't understand what the strategy. Then I said, where are you getting your ideas from? They're saying we're getting it from the minds of our mentors. Okay, now that means you're not drilling at all deep enough. They haven't read a book on strategy. They have no idea even what I'm talking about when I say, what's your strategy? You think what you're doing is strategy. I say what you're doing is just doing. So I asked them both to buy a copy of Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. It's readable, it's easy to read, it's an easy read book. It has some very good principles around sales and marketing. If I'd given them something like our book, Camel's Tiger, they would not go past the first page. It's very difficult to read that. So something, sorry? Yeah, it's a very intense book. And you need to read at least 2 or 3 before you read that one. Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, easy reading, easily available. You can get the highlights of it from Professor Google or YouTube and stuff like that. But if you haven't picked up, it's about those early stages of sales and marketing. Makes a good read, basically. So, just basic stuff like that is about drilling. You are now a CEO of a company. You're a founder of a company, a co-director. Don't you want to know how to run your business? It just strikes me as bizarre when people rely on gut instinct, and not in this room because you've all chosen to come here, but you're at the tip of the iceberg, and below the waterline are all those scientists and engineers who think business is just common sense, right? Why do I need all this stuff? It's just wasting my time. Let me go with my screwdriver or my internet coding or my cellular alliance in the lab or whatever it is. That's much more interesting than this boring stuff. So they never make any progress. So these are some of the things. I mean, I'm now almost touching on pride and hubris as a cause of failure. Too proud to change, too proud to learn other stuff because somehow, it's marketing, right? So we have those issues going on. Talking of marketing, one of our colleagues and friends, Uday Phadke, and I who co-authored the books, he's the lead author really on Camels, Tigers, Unicorns, and the Scale-Up Manual. He's very, very passionate about understanding what he calls the market space which we operate. Maybe some of you heard him on the Prime sessions. And he's got something there, I think, which is really quite powerful. And I keep telling you that we need to make it more accessible as well, to really genuinely understand what's going on. So if you decide that you're going to develop a technology and go into a certain market, don't we need to understand how that market works? Its regulations, what drives the marketplace, who are the players in it, the competition in it, what are the overall supply chains that are operating in it. So it's like if you're doing a reconnaissance as a military person, you want a satellite image of something, or you want a helicopter image of something. At the very least, as an entrepreneur, if you're going into a particular market, we also need that overview before we go off and do what it is we need to do. So in this case, I think not understanding that market ecosystem, how does it all work, means that some of you may have done the business model canvas, things of that kind, tools from the Silicon Valley and so on. You talk about who's your customer, you know, you need to do pivots, you need to do fast fails, you need to test it and so on. That to me sometimes sounds a little bit like, let's throw some mud on the wall and see what sticks. And if that bit of mud doesn't stick on that wall, you know what we'll do? We'll throw some more mud on a different part of the wall and see if that sticks. My phone is doing something?
No, I don't know. I'll check it out. You continue.
So step one really is for people who don't really understand where they are, they're constantly pivoting this way and that. I've got a nice example of that. It's not gone badly, it's just going slowly. A company in the Netherlands called BDD Bioneedle, which is a soluble pellet of some kind, which is shot into the arm with some medicines impregnated in it. That's the basic idea. So we're in the middle of the pandemic, thought, oh my God, vaccine companies surely need this stuff because it gets rid of the cold chain, gets rid of wasteful plastics and needles and all sorts. You don't need training people, you just take this little delivery device that looks a little bit like a pistol, poof, in it goes. How simple is that? Beautiful. Nobody wanted to talk to us. They're all busy right in the middle of it, delivering their vaccines. And every single person was involved in that part of it. Nobody has the time to look at some wacky innovation that's going to take 5 years to get past regulators, to get past this, to do some trials, efficacy. So first you need to check does the pellet work. Secondly, if you put medicine into it, will that remain stable inside that pellet for long enough that it works? What will be the shelf life of that pellet? The next thing is the gun delivery system, the air gun type thing. Who's designing that? Does that work? If you apply that to pellets, the two those work together. Right? So there are a lot of efficacy, but all of that to be done. And as we go further and further into it, you realize actually that's because we misunderstood completely that the vaccine companies are the wrong people to talk to. What we should be talking to is all the other delivery agencies, the delivery device people, the regulators, understanding those. The vaccine guys just want to sell more vaccine. We're saying become efficient with delivery. They don't care. Who should we talk to? We should talk to the regulators, the buyers, the consumers of the stuff, the big government agencies, the hospitals. We have a solution for you. They can then drive up the supply chain to the vaccine guys, say, we want to deliver vaccine in this method. Right? I mean, this goes back to a very basic mistake is, how do you sell more toothpaste? Right? That's sort of stupid question. So, well, by making the hole in the tube bigger. That's how you sell more toothpaste. So instead of having, I don't know, some tiny droplets of toothpaste coming out, you have an entire tube of the stuff coming out. Go buy more toothpaste. So the same thing with the vaccines, right? You're fundamentally telling the guy, your dosage thing, there's no waste, this, that, and the other. No, it's the buyer that's really the person we should speak to first, and then go up the chain. And that became evident when you think back to a company called ARM, which is a microchip company. They had a low energy microprocessor, which initially got fame in Nokia 3210, which I suspect is long before if you were around. Before that, the phones were the size of a brick. And after that particular ARM chip came out, phones became the size of these things, small and agile. And the way that the sales were made was they talked at that time to Nokia and various other phone companies. So like, we have this, if you put this, your phones will be so much more efficient, this, that, that. Those phone companies then told the fabs that were making the chips, we want you to incorporate ARM's technology in the chip. Right? So who's going to drive that chain? So by understanding the market ecosystem, you know where to go and poke. Whose problem are you trying to solve? And so why it's important, that first line, and a poor understanding of that just means that so many companies complain about running out of cash as a primary reason for failure. Now, that's a symptom of not having this right. So, and as without understanding how the market itself works and operates and who the big players are, et cetera, you then don't have an understanding of the needs of the customers and the stakeholders in that value chain. And honestly, I don't know what the survival rates are at the moment, but people going through incubators and accelerators have a much better chance of survival than those that don't. Right? That's kind of general. And the UK experience is that something like 90% of businesses will fail within 5 years or so. Why should they fail? Well, I think one of the dominant reasons is not really fully understanding how the markets work, how customers think. Pricing and revenue models are not clear. Also, massive headache. We got the wrong pricing for the wrong thing. We might undercut ourselves. We have a better solution, but we underprice for some reason. Our business models, our revenue models are challenged. Company we're working with right now, Terra Waste Plastic. Somebody came up with the idea of Terra Waste as a service. So never try to own the plastic. Just provide a service to get rid of the plastic into a synthetic oil. So charge for that as a service. Because if you look in the marketplace, if we wanted to buy the plastic, turn it into oil and sell it to the petrochemical industry, our price point is given to us by the oil majors, right? The barrel of oil is about $80, $90 a barrel. Whatever we do, we can't be more expensive than that. We probably have to compete with that, which means our entire engineering process has to be predicated on bringing the prices below a certain point. Yet we might be giving a higher value. So why do we want to get into that? Instead, if we charge so many dollars per day, per hour to get rid of people's plastic, they can sell the oil at whatever price they want. For them, it's a waste problem, which is less expensive by being able to sell the oil. So we solve a different problem for them. The different ways of looking at price points in different industry sectors. We don't really fully understand that we can't charge effectively for that solution. Messaging. God, this is such a challenging issue because we get stuck in defining our product and not defining the solution. So messaging is very complex. Again, talking Terra Waste, are we a waste handling company or a new materials company? Makes a massive difference. Two youngsters from Madhya Pradesh, a lovely little business called UpCopy, which they've come up with, which is to help people write better text in English. So it's like a Grammarly, but on steroids, right? If I say it like that, you kind of get it straight away. If I try to describe all the features and so on, you'll say, but that just sounds like spell check and Grammarly. Why is it different? So I just tell you that it's like Grammarly, but it's way more. Kind of getting a mental picture of that. Who's their customer going to be? Initially, they're targeting all these marketing folks in companies all over the world. Now they've landed completely by accident on English as a second language as a target market. Now that's so clear. If English is my second language, I need to be able to write, not only have good grammar and good spelling, but I also need to know the tone and the emotion of the article. I need to understand what feelings it's leaving me with. What is it, a positive, negative image? Is it neutral? What is it creating? So suddenly the market becomes clear and the proposition becomes clear and the messaging becomes clear. It's a tool for people who want to write, whose English is a second language and want to write better script. I know some of you will say, what's about ChatGPT? That sort of stuff is coming, but that's not you doing the writing, that's just pressing a few buttons. Strategy drifting with no scalable solution. Tech companies, so guilty of this. The next 3-4 points I'll roll into one. We don't have a customer for this. I know what we'll do. We'll invent a product. We'll invent another product. Because surely customers will want that. Customers don't buy the second product. I know what we'll do. We'll invent a third product. That's because that's going into our comfort zone for inventive capacity. Keep on revising the product model, without talking to enough customers to figure out whether anybody needs the thing. So it's easier to do that if you're a scientist and engineer than it is to go talk to customers. And that is probably one of the main things I see. And then every so often somebody will run a workshop on something called product market fit. No idea what the product is, no idea what the market is, but let's have a workshop on product market fit. It's a good way of spending time. It feels like we're doing something about this problem. As long as that. So we're happy we've done something, and some post-it notes will be there on a flip chart somewhere, and stuff of that kind, without line 1 having been tackled on this chart. The other thing is, messaging needs to be creative and compelling. The language needs to be strong. There's a beautiful example out of Bangalore, actually. A young woman came to one of these events, and then she talked to me during the coffee break and said, yeah, I have a negative pressure device for the reduction of microbial loads in hospitals. So, oh, wow, sounds good. What is it? It's a negative pressure device which will just remove. So why would I need this thing? Because every time there is a hospital around, doctors or families come around, dust goes up in the hospital. Shoes, feet, stomping, air currents change, all that. So we need a negative pressure device for removal of bacterial load in hospitals. Okay, fine. What is it? Oh, well, it's a device. How big is it? It's about this big. Where do you put it? Well, you put it on the side of the beds, on the wall. You strap it to the wall. And what does it do? So as people come in, basically, the negative pressure allows it to suck the air in. Oh, you're talking about a vacuum cleaner strapped to the wall. No, it's a negative. Yeah, it's a vacuum cleaner. Okay. So let's not get caught up in our own jargon to such an extent that we put people off coming to us. Let's tell me what it is in simple language. This is a hardy perennial, this job. This is something that will keep Premnath and his team going for another 1,000 years. Because happily, you engineers and scientists will keep coming up with this stuff. And we have to keep on working on the meaning of it. And also, it needs a bit of humor, creative stuff. It needs, why do people buy this thing? Patagonia is trying to convince you that it's a sustainable business by showing you its, beautiful images of Southern America, not telling you that fabrics are full of polyester. The last thing it is sustainable, right? So all kinds of things are happening with messaging. I'm not suggesting for one moment you should tell lies and fibs, but getting that image right in the customer's mind also. Why should they buy from you? Beyond the technology, what's happening there? Is the message clear enough for them? So that lack of customer engagement is deeper and deeper. You need to dig into the customers. You need to go talk to them and listen to them in ways. So again, petrochemical company, we're talking about having had an experiment done at IIT Madras for some polycarbonate, which is not a big deal in India. Turns out it's a very big deal in the automotive industry. This huge petrochemical company, when I told them we'd done this experiment, the results we got from it. Before that, in the 2 meetings we'd had before that, they were basically saying, you're a bit too early for us. Come back, when you don't need us, kind of message, right? Because we're always too early for them, right? So the message you have from all the investors, they're always too early. Always too early. So when we talked about the polycarbonate and the yield we got of the synthetic oil from pressure cooking the polycarbonate, their eyes kind of lit up. And then, because for them, that's a very big part of their work. And at that moment, I said, well, sometimes we put in seed money to just get a seat at the table so we know what's happening in this. And then we want to have the rights to licensing the technology when it does mature. So now FOMO was kicking in. Fear of missing out was kicking in. How do we get people across the line on that? So I'm now working on that as my strategy for another 3 or 4 corporate ventures, saying, the bus is leaving. You're either with us or you're going to really miss out on a big one, right? So I'm hoping that by about June, July, we'll have had more experiments done by IIT Madras. It's not an Indian company, by the way. And then with those results, we can really be persuasive and compelling in the way we sell our story to these big corporates. Say, You need to jump on now. You need to jump on now. And maybe that's the role of an old guy, with gray hair who can do it. And this competition, of course, is gone. Now, I think that company that I'm talking about, the plastics company, started life as in a different world. And there, the description of it was hydrothermal liquefaction using concentrated solar power for the remediation of waste into value. What is that? So that became pressure cooking waste. Everybody understands pressure cooking. In every kitchen, every house is a pressure cooker. So, but not that the bar pressure is 1 to 3 bar of a pressure cooker in the kitchen, but about 200 bar of pressure. It's a bit serious, but that's basically the principle. You take the pressure cooker, you're stuffing the waste in it, close the lid, and that's how you generate. There's a bit more chemistry involved in that, but that's fundamentally. So the moment the language changed a little bit to that, people began to get it. So, seems to hesitate each time. Is there a timer on here that says, Shai, you've talked for too long?
You just need to go on the slide and then.
Let me speed through this because this will be familiar with. There are two pressures, I think, or to talk about money matters. One is macroeconomic conditions about which you and I can do very little, the way the world is operating right now, right? Inflation, lack of money supplies, this and that. Maybe not in India, but certainly in Europe, you can get that feeling. And the other internal stuff, which you can do something about. And basic information, is that available in your company? In bookkeeping terms, simple stuff. Do you know where the money is, where it's coming and going? Because again, all the headings you see here, I have seen them causing enormous ruction for companies. Huge problems. Don't even have a basic understanding of bookkeeping or management accounts. The accounts are not right. Valuation numbers get screwed up. I mean, that was happening in one of the companies just 3 months ago. We hired a management accountant, finance guy. Didn't fully seem to know it really. He was a public sector finance guy, I think, in the end, not a private sector venture capital funded fast growth company guy. Right? So he didn't understand the dynamics of the numbers within that. We had a terrible problem with our 2 VCs in the boardroom. These numbers didn't look right. And one of our shareholders gave us such a hard time over it because it slipped through with a big mistake in it. So he's been given his feedback on the cash flow forecast, not spending. These are things that people tell you they run out of money, right? The outside world, not much we can do. We need to understand how it works. Inside, have all the disciplines that you need so you really fully understand. I'm oversimplifying because time is tight, but I would say all of those things I've seen causing massive issues within companies. And it sounds stupid to say this, that a basic bookkeeping function can lead to a company going bust. And the reason is that there are hidden costs in a company which we don't spot if we don't have the basic numbers in place. And one of those basic numbers is, for example, break-even analysis. What point do we break even? Break-even can be taken a dynamic way. Just to give you an example of that, if you have a gross margin of 50%, let's say, and you take note that it's 50% of some random number somewhere, some big number in a profit and loss account, but 50%, you put a timeline to it. On a 6-day week, roughly speaking, which is where India is, you break even when? About Wednesday afternoon? 50%, because you're making enough margin that the rest of the week, even if you don't do any sales, you will survive. So if your break-even point, if your gross margin is 20-30%, depending on your overheads, your sales required to break even is going to be so far out, so close to your actual sales, that you end up being a busy fool. You're thrashing around 7 days a week trying to make work for 5 days a week. So it's absolutely critical that you understand those sorts of numbers in a company. Break even for most of us that have no revenues coming in, we still need to know when we cash break even will happen for the investors. But overall, the cash flows will start to change that you can actually start to meet your own bills and not have to keep on dipping into investors' money. So those are some of the things that come out of deep understanding of the numbers. Yep. And the final one, I guess, is the technology risk. You're all familiar with this stuff. This is that the thing doesn't work unless you put more and more money into it. It's like a bottomless pit. But what problem are you trying to solve? And you may be putting a lot of money to solving the wrong problem. What feedback have you got from customers that that's a particular problem that needs solving? Or that your solution is the best fit for their problem that they're trying to solve? We can suffer easily from what you call the ugly baby syndrome. Do you know what I mean by that? Ugly baby syndrome. Our baby is always the most beautiful, right? And some friends of yours might come and see your baby and think, oh my God, that's an ugly baby. Right? They can't tell you that because that's rude and heartbreaking. So they never tell you that your baby is ugly. And you don't want to see that the baby is ugly because that's also a bit difficult to take on. So your baby is, of course, looking like Krishna or whatever. Right? This is beautiful. So you keep thinking that that's the pathway for it. Actually, you might have to change it completely and say, it's not working. It's not working. The other one is systems thinking, lack of systems thinking. So we think our problem is our little technology device is exactly what the customer needs. The customer needs a whole solution. That's an interesting example from Corrosion Radar, where I'm non-exec director, where we have put together a sensor to measure moisture content, and which others, it's basically a wire, and we wrap it around pipes and tanks and things like that, which are insulated. So it's a phenomenon called corrosion under insulation that we're trying to address. So we have this, we have the reader, the box transmits data and stuff like that. You go talk to customers and say, we've got this. The first thing the operative says is, yeah, it's electric, it needs to be battery. We can't have electric stuff in our refinery installation plants. Oh my God, okay. So you go off and make that now battery operated. Then you go back to them. I think that's lack of conversations. You go back to them and they say, yeah, well, it needs to be bomb proof because refineries can explode. Well, if the whole refineries explode, who cares about a sensor box? But apparently it needs to be bomb proof. Anyway, be that as it may. And so you begin to realize that actually the customer has got lots of different things. We thought we'd be covering pipelines in this thing, but actually the first thing that came was a tower from one of the big petrochemical companies, because that particular tank had huge fluctuations in temperatures in the content, causing enormous stress to the tank. So totally different application came out of that. So this then opens up other conversations, right? So actually understanding which problem we're solving is not just a corrosion or moisture, actually solving a data problem, you're solving a whole product problem, you're solving risk issues, etc. Solving a lot of different things for customers. Understanding which bit really is of interest to them, why they'll pay you is the magic. Anyway, there's tough regulations to get through as well, and approvals, especially in medtech and so forth. And not having somebody in the team who understands all of that. And the positioning of the technology, is it a product, is it a platform, is it a service, what is it we're trying to do, at what level are we trying to do it? That again is one of Uday's hobby horses, and I would say he's absolutely right in understanding correctly what it is we're trying to do. And oftentimes we don't do that because we're driven by templates of trying to describing our product. When we don't have a product, we might have a platform. We might have a service. We may not have a product. Enabling. So these are some of the issues, I would say, that I've seen over many years arising from being with people and listening to them, trying to mentor them and seeing them listening or not listening to the advice that's being offered. So just stimulated some thinking for all of you. Thank you very much.
questions, anybody? Yeah, hello? It's on. Can you hear? Any questions? So, yeah, back.
Yeah.
Thank you, educator. Thank you, Dr. Vyakarnam, for getting you here and speaking. Thank you for your gems of wisdom. You mentioned at the start about entrepreneurship not being known to science guys decades back. Have you seen a change in the approach that they are now ready to unlearn and learn, and when they come to just pitching competitions? Because I've entered a lot of startups, and I've seen kind of a sea change in the attitude of people mentoring startups as young as like I was at the last weekend, where kids as young as 12-year-olds were pitching. So is that the approach also of the specialist or the subject matter experts in different things as an approach for the business approach in entrepreneurship for young entrepreneurs?
There's been an absolute sea change. You're absolutely right about that. From where I started my career, where we might have been about a dozen people who understood the topic, I would say at least in the UK, to now hundreds of people understanding this. And the pitching competitions, the business competitions, the technology fairs, the science events, all of that has just risen the game so beautifully. Actually, it's very inspiring to see. I remember when I first started teaching at University of Reading, we started the course there, and I used to go twice a week from Cambridge to Reading. So the round trip was 200 miles. That means what is it? 360-kilometer round trip. I mean, I have to say I was close to thinking I'm a bit of an idiot. I used to go down in the afternoons, come back after 8 o'clock, 5 to 8. There were a dozen students in the classroom. And we started that in the student union bar because there was no formal entrepreneurship going on at Reading. But a friend of mine had asked me, so I said yes, and off we went. This was Wednesdays and Fridays after Enterprise News the day before. And now the entire university runs entrepreneurship courses for some 30,000 students a year. The seeds for that were sown at that time. And about 4 or 5 years in to when I was involved with them, there's a very well-known TV program called Dragon's Den, a bit like Shark Tank and other such. That had taken off big time in the UK. When I came in the classroom to do my teaching, some of the students had seen those programs. And they were asking me all kinds of really interesting questions. So I had to raise my bar to compete with a TV program. That's the level of public engagement that was taking place. It's fantastic to see. And it's a global phenomenon, without question. I don't know whether we should obsess about entrepreneurship at the age of 12, because I think they still need to learn to read and write. But it's not a bad idea.
Maybe while other questions come up, one of the things which we see as problems that the real stumbling blocks are around the founding team itself, right? Not just the rest of the team, but the founding team. So, are there any good practices that you have seen of, first of all, constructing a founding team? How do you find co-founders, especially in academic startups which are science-led, and so on? And are there ways by which these you can actually reduce the difficulties that many co-founding teams face over a period of time? And of course, many of these have to do with expectations and aspirations and what happens actually, and changing dynamics of the business and so on. So it's not meant to be static, but nonetheless, sometimes it seems to work, but very often we see that that's a big problem area for many startups.
Yeah, I think you're right, Prima. One of the issues in founding teams, it seems to me, if I was to provide a headline answer to this, it is what we call just-in-time learning, sometimes just too late learning. Because they're so caught up in the moment, they don't see what's going on around them. and they have got caught up in that narrow view. So in terms of good practice in trying to build teams, I've seen now two types of programs, both of which have a similar idea, which is to bring perfect strangers together to curate and incubate an idea. So kind of brainstorming events. And TerraWaste itself is an example of that. It's a Latvian event, happened to go to it because of Brexit, and then it got some support, got a team going over there, and now we're working at it. And where a team can come together functionally well is to talk a lot to each other about, have somebody also from the outside who can make sure that the values and the vision is shared or is shaped together into something that's exciting. Because those are where differences can arise, and make it at the early stages probably less transactional and more relational. And everybody's got good networks from their own alumni, school friends, university friends, previous work colleagues, etc., that they can go and talk to. And I think the more you talk about your business to people, the more excited you are by it, the more you will actually start to attract talent towards it. So that's how do you build the team. How do you keep it? Then it's a lot of hard work required. And where are the break points in that? Equity splits and options can become very contentious. And we're going through that right now.
In scientific institutions, for example, like in Cambridge, you had these sort of large matchmaking kind of events, or events where people could meet each other and so on.
Yes.
What was the, were there any general lessons from that in terms of what seems to work and what doesn't? Some of the things we are also learning is if you wait too long to bring in co-founders, it doesn't work, right? Because then a lot of water has flowed down, the bridge, and it's difficult to sort of get a fair arrangement unless one of the founders is extremely generous and so on, right? So how are there some general rules there?
I think a reality check. If you want to build a good team, they have to be inducted into the team. We need to have a spirit of generosity rather than winner takes all. That's just hiring people to be our slaves, right? That's not a team building activity. Certainly, one of the companies where I had a bust up with the founder of the idea was trying to persuade him to bring in a CTO as a co-founder. Some questions online?
Yeah.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay, so he said, no, I don't need the CTO as a co-founder. I just need him to sign off on some forms. I've been doing this for 3 years. Why do I call him a co-founder? He's not a co-founder. He became very grammatical about the subject and not understanding the concept that if you involve this person more deeply, the he also owns the idea and shaping of it, it'll go faster. He's moved on his own. I don't think it's going anywhere as a company. I think it's just ironic that he then went on an accelerator program and gave exactly the same message. And he has an MBA from the French Business School in CI as a co-founder. He's a finance property guy, not a technologist. So I was trying to get a technical guy to be a co-founder with him. He declined. So there are issues, personal issues that get in the way. Hubris, I think, is an issue of ego. All these human qualities that we read about.
Sure. There's a question from Pranita Prakash. It says, what would your advice be? What would be your advice to an edtech startup on lessons learned? Have you seen a common mistake, especially during an early stage? Focus on edtech.
Well, without naming the company,
yeah,
one of the companies I was talking about was precisely edtech. There was a strategy issue. EdTech is just such a broad term. I'm assuming the bottom of this camera, so I'm speaking to the camera now. Which bit of EdTech are we addressing? Are we addressing schools? Are we addressing consumers? Are we addressing government regulations? What are we trying to address? And The example of asking the two co-founders to go off and read a strategy book was precisely from EdTech. They were clueless and just doing operational stuff. For me, that's the nearest example I've got. I've got one.
That comes down to basically defining the markets very clearly, understanding value for customers and so on, right? That's what it is.
That, and actually you're no longer in ed tech, you're now in business, right? I mean, there's the part where you're creative, I want to be an entrepreneur phase. That's the fun bit. Go off endlessly to networking events, you're doing pitching, competitions, this, that, all that kind of stuff. Suddenly somebody says, yes, we'll back you. Now the trouble starts, right? Because you now have to make a personal transition from being this inventive, entrepreneurial young person to becoming a business person. So initial days are fun because it's still technical. So I'm in ed tech. But actually, no, you're now becoming the CEO and co-founder and manager of a business that's going to start employing people, talk to customers, send them invoices, all that other stuff that needs to be done. And if you're not willing to make those changes, it doesn't matter which tech you're in, it's going to flop.
Yeah, and coincidentally, the back end happens to be something.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But the business is the front end is the business. Yeah, that's what it is. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Thank you. It was wonderful to hear Dr. Shailendra. So my question is, I want to understand your insight about when a new venture is there, want to build the team, what kind of qualities one must be looking for, like technical expertise, or like passion about the work, or the already like acquired experience in the relevant area, or one who has perhaps not really relevant experience but seems very intellectually smart and passionate about new things or new science. So what do you suggest, like what one should be?
I think all those four are fantastic qualities, okay? I would add probably two more qualities to that. One is open to learning. And the other one is humility. They know when to ask the right question. So I think I would add those two elements to your four criteria. Because what we're looking for in all our teams is either Wonder Woman or Superman. We're looking for a Marvel hero character to come in and supercharge our business. And it's not that easy. So those four qualities are really good summary, actually. But just add the other two.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Another question is like, this is a tough question for us as well. Like how big team we should be building in the beginning? So we go like slowly until we have the stage of proving the principle or proof.
I would say probably to all the academic literature on team building will tell you that somewhere between 3 to 5 early team, somebody who will take on the role of CEO. That's a lot. There's not so much, frankly speaking, kudos in that. It's just a lot of hard work. Very stressful role. Might feel a bit fancy on the business card, but actually it's a really tough role. It's like being a super duper admin person with the charisma and this and that and leadership qualities, etc. Then somebody who can probably push the technical side forward and would know how to do that. They may not themselves know coding anymore, but they used to do it 20 years ago, and they know how to build coding teams, if you like, just talking IT stuff. The other person I would probably put in maybe part-time early on would be a CFO, very experienced finance officer, who's willing to put their name to your business, willing to come to investor meetings with you. Those would be probably the early three. Then you'll start to build marketing. Until you have something to sell, it's very difficult to have marketing, right? The CEO has to do that. And then somewhere in the first 2 years, I would try and find somebody who can be a gray-haired mentor for you, like a chairwoman, chairman, whatever, who can come and help you to build that, construct that team to the first dozen or so. So my example would be from a company called Corrosion Radar, where the inventor, Truffle, IIT Madras, then Cranfield, came up with this idea of corrosion and insulation. Did a pitch at one of my startup events. My network of various people who came to do mentoring on one of the 3 days of the program. One is called Phil O'Donovan. He was one of the founders of Bluetooth. So has a lot of credibility with him. There were a team of 9, 3 core, and another 6 external. 9 people started CSR, Cambridge Silicon Radio. Phil came by chatting with Truffle over coffee. Said, "You're not going to get anywhere unless you build a team." That's all he said. So luckily for Truffle, there's another PhD in his department, Narja Siratani, Iranian guy. Super chap. Got very lucky with Miranda. So the two of them became co-founding team. But it was clear that they're not CEO material. So one of my colleagues, whose son is at the same school as the person we introduced, she had left her role at something called the Welding Institute, the consulting business in metallurgy. So she was looking for something new. So Shiraz came in, we had some meetings, we put Shiraz into the team. But now all 3 were first-time entrepreneurs. All 3 with PhDs in related fields. So fantastic subject matter expertise, without question. Truffle, deep thinker, slow, I'm not saying slow person, just methodical. Merda, like a fireworks going off everywhere, very emotional guy, but my God, switched on. And Shiraz, ball of energy, huge presence in the room, but she's never been a CEO before. So these 3, and this is really interesting. So we went to the University Arms, you may or may not remember, had a refit, having very expensive cocktails one evening. I said, I think I know just the person for you guys. And I picked up the phone, his number's in my phone as it happens, Richard Green, who used to be founding CEO of a company called Ubisense. Richard, have you got capacity for one more company in your portfolio? So what is it, right? So make the introduction. So Richard came as the chairman. He has done both an IPO and NASDAQ and a trade sale to General Electric. So he had both experiences on the side. And his own favorite CFO came in with him. Now, the moment you put Richard and Glenn into the team with Shiraz, Truffle, and Merda, suddenly you have one awesome team of 5 people. So we raised money from Aramco and here and there. I mean, it started to move so much faster. So understanding your own. Now Richard is regularly mentoring Shiraz into a superb CEO. And I'm enjoying it on the side as a non-exec.
So last couple of questions. One from
Online. So Urmila has a question. Urmila, are you able to unmute? A question?
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. My question is, being in academic, I'm also professor, and being in academics, like, being a professor, how it helps in initiating any type of entrepreneurship, and what are the qualities, good qualities, and what are the challenges also, and how much is the possibility that being a professor will be able to take care of our enterprise also.
Oh, what are you a professor of?
I'm in healthcare, sir. I'm Dr. Urmila Aswal from Department of Pharmacology.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so you got lots of good ideas coming through.
Yeah.
Two things I would say is, one is, unless your heart is in it, don't try to start a business. Try to find somebody who can do it for you, with you as a co-founding team member. I think the most important stories are, for me anyway, coming out of the Cambridge area, and Premnath knows one or two of these people. Professor Richard Friend, who's a professor in physics department, retired now. There was a stream of ideas coming out. But his good friend is the gentleman called Herman Hauser, who is a venture capitalist and entrepreneur. And so those two go for walks from time to time and exchange ideas and stimulate ideas. Then probably the most famous story that you must be already knowing about Solexa and Illumina, the gene sequencing machine. That's David Kleineman and Shankar Balasubramaniam, 2 professors in Cambridge. They kept their professorships in Cambridge. Well, David's, I think, retiring now, but Shankar is still there. And they talked over dinner, I think, in some famous pub called the Panton Arms with the venture capitalists of Abingworth. And the idea was born out of that. And pretty soon, the management capacity was brought in to Solexa, which eventually, of course, sold with pre-revenue at a high level. And then many such companies. So the model certainly being pursued is the professor works with an experienced business person.
Mhm.
And that nice synergy between the two, if the trust is there between the two, then that is fantastic, because that's when, because the business community also needs professors to continue doing their good work, because you don't have a stream of ideas in the future, right? So I think it benefits. If that's the career you would like to have, I would say try to find some business folks who can inspire and to join you in your journeys, not just one, but several journeys from your inventions.
Thanks a lot. Sir, I would like to continue with the challenges also.
Of what, running a business or of your department?
Yeah, both the things simultaneously.
Okay, sure. Well, I just find a box of aspirin tablets and keep going.
Let's go to the next question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir.
You're welcome.
So there's another question from Manoj. What is your take on founders who are working part-time in their startups?
Have to. No choice to begin with. It's called a side hustle. Call it what you will. It doesn't matter. Side hustle sounds a little bit shady and dodgy. But if there is no money in the system, what's your choice? So yes, at some point, one has to make the jump. So that trigger has to be there when all the signals are in place. There's enough money in the system. But up until then, we can't put our families at risk. We have a duty of care. We have to be sensible about our affordable loss. We have to take all those things into account. So I have absolutely no problem if founders are part-time for a while. If they continue being part-time 3, 4, 5 years in, this is a hobby for them, not a real business.
One last one, there's a startup by Akshay. He's making end-to-end platform for renewable energy. So he wanted to understand any major mistakes that you have seen people do in the platforms and marketplace businesses.
I think just not understanding the market ecosystem. Because as technical people, we don't necessarily understand what a market ecosystem looks like. I'm facing this exact problem with TerraWaste right now. When we came up with the idea of hydrothermal liquefaction of waste, we were coming up with basically a pressure cooker idea. Who needs this stuff? So we try to understand the waste handlers, what they require. Then we find there's so many different types of waste handlers. Yeah, there's a dry waste handling, which is a different game altogether in plastics. There's the wet waste people. Frankly, also there's a mafia involved in that, right? I don't want to end up in a landfill. So who do we want to talk to? And then there's the other competition, there's the downstream people. So until we understand all of the components and elements of a market ecosystem, it's very difficult to say which problem we're trying to address. We can end up making mistakes in all of those areas.
I think the last question.
Aditya will take it over.
Go ahead.
So you have mentioned so many things about it in a way, like one could speak. And we have done some mistakes in the past. In hindsight, when we look at them, we realize that the challenges are different. From an external perspective, it's easier to look at them. But how to get away with the bias when we are working on those aspects? Is there a framework or is there a way in which we can reevaluate our strategies, work on these things while we are working on our startup?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there are so many tools and methods available. I talked about telling the co-founders of the tech company to go read a book. So that's a good place to start, is to read voraciously around your startup arena. There are things like objectives and key results, OKRs. So you can put those sort of frameworks into place. You can put into place a timeline, quarterly results, monthly results, have some discipline. One of my favorites would probably, sorry. that came out was two examples I can give you there. One was two brothers had started a women's fashion retail chain in UK first. They've done it several times. They were of that generation, Jewish families that started their lives in the UK from where their backgrounds were. But they had something they called a bagel break. Bagels are very Jewish steamed bread, right? And Brick Lane in East London is famous for that. Now it's famous for Bengali restaurants. That time it's famous for Jewish restaurants. 24/7 bakery. And they used to go to what they called a bagel break every day at around 10:30. Two brothers and any senior managers that are around. There are some rules around this. One of those bagel breaks are literally only about what the next thing should be, not what has happened in the past. No office politics, no talking about people. What should happen next? Right? So that at that time, they grew from nothing to 100 million in revenues very quickly by having that intense focus. What should we be doing next to grow our company? Type of conversation. Second rule that they had was if they had a board meeting, a team meeting, nobody would leave the meeting until everybody agreed or aired their opinions and disagreed vehemently. But a final statement was made that everybody would have the same sentence when they left the meeting. Why? Because two people can leave the meeting and say the same thing in two different ways. That has a massive impact on the team outside, not part of the meeting. So they said their description was even if there's blood on the walls, you don't leave the room until everyone agreed everything. So this, I think that's quite a powerful lesson from Oasis as they do their company. Hope that helps.
I think with that we'll close. Yeah. Let's thank Shai once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shai, I think this is for you.
Thank you very much.
There's a book.
This is book.
Name Prime as well. I think you can get a copy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, just keep drinking the hot water. Thank you very much. We're sorry about this.
So people who are online, please do not leave the session without giving us your feedback. People who are here, you have been passed on the feedback forms. Please hand them over back to Sharvari after you are given, and we can continue the discussion over tea and coffee outside. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Dr. Shah.
Thank you very much.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think reaching the limits.
If you want to use it, it's okay.
I'll leave it there. Oh, sure.
You want to wait it or do you want to
That one.
have some tea?
Yeah.
We have black coffee.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
The plain water also? Yes, sir.
It's fine.
I'm Aditya Kapil.
Yes, I think I met you online.
Yeah, look like
Oh. Hello, Niruta.
बोल शर्वरी
Can you like stop the recording and end the meeting?